The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 120.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position healers.
Wearing a mid-fin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're continuing our discussion of the two-parter that began last week with Human Nature and continues with Family of Blood, featuring David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Folks, as I usually do, take a moment at the beginning here to remind you to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, to retweet the show on Twitter, leave us comments. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe. You can do so in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or YouTube, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. And above all, please share the podcast with your friends and family to help us grow our community and reach more listeners. And I want to continue from last week when I asked for some volunteers for SQPN. If you know anything about audio editing, websites using WordPress, just knowing how to post things even. If you want to help us with social media, you want to help us with organizing the shows behind the scenes, keeping track of feedback and of different participants and that sort of stuff. We're looking for help. So if you could send us, if you're interested at all, we can have a longer conversation over email or whatnot. Send me an email to help@sqpn.com and let us know that you're interested in giving us a little help. It's not a huge commitment. Whatever you can do, we would love for your help.
And you don't even have to be in the U.S. because, internet. In fact, if you're working halfway around the world, maybe working off hours compared to us would be good. I mean, we have a show all the way from Australia, the Catholics of Oz, which is a great show, and it works great, because internet. So timey-wimey. So we're in the second part of this episode from the third season, featuring Martha Jones as companion, aired in June 2007, just to place it in time for you. And we're continuing with the Doctor who has become human to hide from some aliens, and he's human John Smith. So the previous episode, and this is based on the novel Human Nature.
Yes.
But in as the title suggests, by becoming human, the Doctor holds up a mirror to human nature, which is really what this is about. It's like, what would he be like if he wasn't a Time Lord? What if he was an ordinary human? How would that affect him? And it's kind of unflattering. He does have likable qualities. He has kind of this bumbling, shy professor, but he's also more militaristic and harder edged and less compassionate. And so it's kind of an interesting, he's recognizable in some ways, but he's different in some ways. And it's kind of, holding up a mirror to us as humans, saying, here are some weak spots. Dom, you had a question in the previous episode where you were wondering, like, okay, in order to hide from them, he has to become human biologically, but why does he need to lose his memories? And I went and I checked the transcript of this episode, and obviously it's implied he needs to become a human biologically, or the Family of Blood can sniff him out, because they can detect his Time Lord biology across space and time. So he says every cell in his body needs to be rewritten. But why would that involve losing his memories? They don't say this, but during the break, I was thinking about, between when we recorded these episodes, I was thinking about that, and it could be they can also, because there's a telepathic component to all of this, they may be able to detect his mind. across space and time as well. And so he'd need to alter that. The problem is, again, with time travel and hunting across time, why do they need to get him at this moment in his timeline? Why not snatch him elsewhere?
Right. They could show up before he even knew they existed and grab him. Yeah, that is a real plot hole that you create by having a time travel show. So
yeah, at least if time can be rewritten, well, then rewrite him and go back to an earlier point in his time and grab him there.
Right. So in this episode, we have one of the major parts of it is this conflict between John Smith and the Doctor. The Doctor becoming this John Smith human guy who realizes that he has to, in a way, die in order to become the Doctor again and save everyone. And we have this.
That becomes the big moral crisis of this episode is he likes being John Smith. He does not want to become this mysterious doctor person he doesn't even remember. It's very much like situations in other episodes where, especially in recent times, where he doesn't want to regenerate.
Right. Well, and that's something I wanted to bring up, which is they make it sort of like a form of suicide, that John Smith would be giving up his life in order to become the Doctor. He would, and the 10th Doctor especially would go on to view regeneration the same way. So he aborts a regeneration in process to keep his current body and to not answer the call of Ood Sigma when it came time for his eventual regeneration, prolonging that time until he finally can't avoid it at the end, literally the end of time, which is the name of the episode, and has to regenerate. So I think this episode is supposed to have this profound effect on how the Doctor views regeneration and changing from this point on, which is interesting.
He also, via retcon, resisted regeneration another time when he avoided becoming the Metacrisis Doctor. And he actually did regenerate, but kept the same face because he couldn't bear becoming another person.
Which one was that? Well,
that's where it's where he gets the Stolen Earth, where he gets shot by the Daleks and regenerates and channels some of the regeneration energy off into the hand that becomes the Metacrisis Doctor. But then later on, Matt Smith reveals, no, that was a full regeneration. I'm the last one. I just had personality issues and kept the same face at the time.
Okay. All right. Right. Okay. Yes.
But this creates an interesting dramatic situation on a meta level, because we as the audience, while it might be nice to see the Doctor as John Smith temporarily, ultimately as the audience, we want the Doctor back. But put yourself in John Smith's perspective, and it's like you have all your life believed you're whoever you are. Let's say Dom Bettinelli. And one day somebody shows up and says, you're not you at all. You're a delusion. And you now, in order to save everybody, you have to give up everything you think you are, Dom, including your family, which is here in the form of Joan Redfern. And you've got to subjectively die so that this other you can be reborn and save everybody. That would be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've seen this same concept in other science fiction. And Star Trek had a version of this when Captain Picard, it's not exactly the same thing, but he lived a whole life as someone else in his mind, and had to kind of give that up at the end. I mean, we've seen this.
Yeah, that's the episode Inner Light. Inner Light, yes.
Which that's one of my favorites. Next Gen is that particular one. I like that one.
It's universally beloved by fans, I think. So let's get back to the story that we previously on Doctor Who. We had this standoff in the at the dance in the village, and we have it used to be called
but only on one night, so it's a one night standoff.
Oh
yes.
No. So for people who may not know, pre-1970s, when one night stand came to mean something else, a one night stand was a one night dance or musical event where you'd set up the stand for one night and have the musicians and the performers perform, and that was the one night stand.
Right. And then as everything, the 60s ruined everything.
I do those all the time, except today they're called dance parties.
So one time they would call this a Mexican standoff, but I think that's not appropriate anymore. So maybe that's not what it is anymore. But it's this standoff where the pistols are pointed in all directions and nobody wants to pull a trigger. And at this point, Tim distracts the family. Tim Latimer, the young boy. He briefly opens the watch, which makes them all freak out because they could smell the doctor's essence. And that lets Martha turn the tables on Mother. And then
and Martha takes charge, and it's like, get these people out of here. Doctor, you take Redfern and get her out of here. And Martha is the adult in the room at this point.
Right. And at one point, Tim rejects the doctor. The doctor tries to, or John Smith tries to have Tim come with him. And he says, no, you're as bad as them. He for whatever his experiences of what's going on with this watch, he's as afraid of the doctor as he is of the family of blood.
Through the watch, he's seen the doctor as the oncoming storm, as this figure of fire and terror and stuff to some people. Also, the doctor last episode authorized an upperclassman to give him a beating. Yeah. So there's kind of that.
That doesn't help matters either. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that teacher. I like Martha. Like you said, she takes charge. She yells at him, "Don't just stand there, run. God, you're rubbish as a human." Which a great moment. So it is a good thing this school is.
Also, I wanted to compliment, because there's this moment at the dance, and it may actually be in the end of the previous episode, but there's this moment in the dance where Martha realizes Jenny has become Mother of Mine. And we get a Martha point of view shot of Jenny and the family of blood, with Mother of Mine walking towards her, talking about what it was like for Jenny to be possessed by her, and how there was all that screaming, and she like waggles her face and smiles and says, screaming joyously. And it's just such a creepy moment.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is effectively creepy. So they run back to the school, it's lucky that the school is built like a fortress, so they can hold out against an army of scarecrows. The doctor calls everyone to arms, and the headmaster, what's going on here, and he tells them, and then he ends up going out to confront Baines outside the gates with another teacher, the red shirt in this moment, who tells him of the war that is coming. He says, "War is coming in foreign fields, war of the whole wide world, with all your boys falling down in the mud. Do you think they'll thank the man who taught them it was glorious?" It's a very profound line. And then the assistant teacher, the headmaster is still clueless about what's really going on until Baines shoots the red shirt teacher and disintegrates him, at which point he runs for his life. So,
and at this point, the heroism of the students in this apparently military school that they forgot to tell us was a military school starts to become apparent as the boys start responding to deal with the situation based on their training. And there is a kind of, even though we're going to have big pacifist elements in this episode, like the will they thank the man who taught them this was glorious, there's also a recognition of the competence and the need for the boys to have these skills. As tragic as the oncoming World War I is, these guys are doing their part, and they don't know it yet, but they're doing something that, the mistakes are kind of made at the level of leaders, but, that brought on the war. But these boys are doing something that does have nobility to it.
Right. And it's proven to be so. So there is a moment where Joan confronts Smith / the doctor about, they're just boys. How can you ask them to fight? And he basically says, I had it here, they're cadets, Miss Jones. They're trained to defend the king and all his citizens and properties. There's this very strong, like, in Martha's objecting, you can't do this, Mr. Smith. She does the same thing I end up doing, which is trying to remember who he's supposed to be at the moment. And that's when the headmaster comes in and he says, "Before I devise an excellent and endless series of punishments for each and every one of you, someone explain very simply and immediately what exactly is going on." And that's where we have this, we're under attack. And then we have this moment where he goes out to confront Baines. He does say something that I missed in that confrontation with Baines. He says, "Oh, Baines and one of the cleaning staff. I should have known. There's always a woman involved." He's just asking to be disintegrated.
So we have racism, classism, and now sexism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I like Baines' response to that, and he does it a couple of times where he's kind of mocking this, yes, sir, attitude. Headmaster, sir, good evening, sir. Come to give me a caning, sir. Would you like that, sir? He just rapid fire off the sir.
Oh, yes. And then they had sent the little girl in because, of course, she's a little girl, so she won't be able to come in through the front door fighting. So, sneak your way in through a back door, they tell her. So then we have the disintegration of the other teacher. Meanwhile, Martha has to
and a huge, unbelievable number of scarecrows shows up. Yes,
like we said before in the last time, every scarecrow in England has been turned into a warrior for.
And then the son of mine, Baines, says that he used some kind of future tech, like you said, Dom, last episode, 3D printing basically to create the scarecrows. They weren't actual scarecrows that had been animated, but that he had created them.
Yeah, maybe it was some of both. Maybe he animated the first one and then Xeroxed it.
Yes, yeah, that could be. So Martha is in the study, frantically searching for the watch in order to turn the doctor back into the doctor.
I love it as she's explaining to Joan Redfern, the matron, what's going on, and she uses the word alien. And another nice bit of, linguistically historical thing, alien means not from abroad, I take it, which of course was the normal meaning as just a person from another country.
Right. He's he's born on another world. And then Martha has to prove that she's a doctor. Like, say, I'm not just following him around. I'm trained to be a doctor. And she's like, "Oh, that's nonsense. Women might train to be doctors, but hardly one of your color," she says. And hardly is skivvy, which I think is a class term. It's skivvy.
I think so.
Yeah. But so Martha says, "Oh," and then rattles off all of the bones of the hand. You read that in a book, she says.
And, yeah, duh.
Yes, to pass my exams.
My medical textbooks. Yes.
Yes. So we have Joan does confront Smith on his background. Like, where are you from, really? Tell me about the place you lived. Tell me about. And all he can repeat are the dry facts of his legend that the TARDIS provided him with.
He
legend
has no vivid childhood memories to draw upon.
He basically repeated Wikipedia is what he did.
Exactly. And he thinks that Joan is pining for the romantic idea of the doctor as opposed to this, country professor at a small boarding school. And sort of throws that back at her. Meanwhile, Latimer.
And Joan gets irrationally pacifist.
Yes. Maybe a little rational, given that her husband died in war. So.
Yeah, no. You can lose a spouse, even under tragic circumstances, and mourn that, and still say there are times where violence has to be used.
Right. I mean, I suppose in this case, yeah.
When you have your school is being besieged by people disintegrating other people, that's one of the times that defending yourself, even with lethal force, is fully justified.
Right. And given that what are you shooting at? Is scarecrows? I mean, who are you really killing?
There's a saying, which I'm sure Father Corey, as a military chaplain, has heard, which is there are no atheists in foxholes. Well, there are also no pacifists in foxholes, and they're in a foxhole right now. Joan is being irrational.
Right. So Latimer is out in the courtyard with Hutchinson, the schoolboy who gave him the beating earlier, but who he's also seen in a future vision in World War I, apparently about to getting killed in battle. They're out in the courtyard piling up sandbags, and Latimer says, he realizes we both survived this because he knows because it's in the future, and says maybe I was given this watch so I could help.
Maybe I stole this watch.
Yes. Yeah. And runs away. Latimer calls him a coward. Hutchinson calls him a coward. He says, "Oh, yes, sir," every time.
Yeah, I love that.
But he uses it to scare away daughter of mine. But it also alerts the family that the doctor's consciousness is contained in the watch. So at this point, as I'm watching this, I said to myself, it feels like they're trying to make a grand statement about the First World War, the horrors of war, but it doesn't have a clear focus or point. There's sort of a vague, war is hell sort of notion. But it's like we've got three different stories going here. We have the, hey, what would if the Doctor became a human? We have a love story and a sad love story, and then we have this war story, and none of them get priority in this.
I think that I mean, that didn't bother me. To me, that's all part of one thing, because what they're saying to us is, since this is all about what is human nature, war seems to be intrinsic to human nature. And that means we're going to have human nature leads to war, and war leads to personal tragedy, like sacrificing romances and lives. And so I view it as part of a logical progression. And for me, the interesting thing is, there's very much a pacifist culture at the BBC in terms of what line this show should take. But there's also a you don't diss what people did to save the country in World War I. Armistice Day is a huge thing in England. And so there's also there's kind of a cultural mandate for pacifism in the management of this show, but there's also a cultural mandate for respecting World War I and what British soldiers did during it. And those two mandates clash. And so the episode has this kind of uncomfortable tension that doesn't fully resolve between those two things. And, while I think that in later episodes, especially in the most recent season, they take the pacifism to ridiculous extremes, here, I think they get the balance about right. I don't know that I'd strike it exactly this way, but World War I was a huge unnecessary tragedy brought on by the mistakes that were made by the secret treaties that the different European nations had and so forth, that and the ideals of the time. And it was a huge unnecessary tragedy, but at the same time, there was something done on the lower level, on the level of individual soldiers and military men and women, the few there were at the time, and mostly nurses, that was genuinely admirable and that deserves commemoration. And so you do have this complex human situation here that grows out of human nature.
Well, there's also the recognition, I think, of, pacifism is a wonderful ideal. But at best, it's an ideal when the enemy is standing at the gates, literally, in the case of this episode.
Yeah.
But, you can think of, okay, maybe World War I was not the greatest example of that, but World War II certainly was. And, especially in Britain, where they're literally being bombed flat by someone who wants to conquer them, and there weren't a lot of pacifists during World War II in Britain, because they knew that this was literally life or death. Either they fight back or they die.
Right.
And there was no middle ground.
Right. So speaking of the enemy at the gates, we have straw men.
By the way, Enemy at the Gates, or maybe it's Enemy at the Doors, is a fascinating British period piece about World War II as seen from the island of Guernsey, because it was occupied by the Nazis. And so there's this fascinating, complex series from the 70s that you can watch on Amazon about what it's like to live under Nazi occupation in the British island of Guernsey.
Yes. Also,
it's kind of like prequel to Man in the High Castle.
There was a recent book that was turned into a movie or miniseries, the Guernsey Potato Pie and Literary Society, I think it's called. Something like that, which is about that same thing, the people living under the German occupation. So what's that?
There's also, if you want to talk about Enemy at the Gates, there was the movie early 2000s about the Battle of Stalingrad. It's also called that.
Yes, which was fascinating. So anyway, that's not this one though. So we have straw men attacking the castle, and it is not a commentary on social media.
Never attack straw men.
Yes. Although I have to wonder, how hard can a scarecrow hit a gate? Because you're made of straw.
Apparently enough to crack a solid 4x4 metal or 4x4 wood beam.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently.
I think these are reinforced scarecrows, like they've got rebar in there or something.
Well, I was wondering, why do the bullets affect the scarecrows at all? I mean, you're just hitting
no vital organs, no nervous system.
The way I kind of figured it was a trick by the family of blood, because of course then they regenerate, the scarecrow haulers regenerate, and the scarecrows all come back to life anyways.
Right. And you've wasted all your bullets. So that's true. Well, the doctor, if you'll notice, he never fires his gun. He's sort of season horror as it comes in. He never actually pulls a trigger.
And he wimps out on dealing with the little girl because broadcast standards.
Right. Yep. They send in the little girl because the family of blood knows that no one will shoot her because she's a little girl. The headmaster, clueless, tries to save her and ends up, he's getting disintegrated.
Dying for his trouble.
Yep. Tim here shows that he's anything but cowardly because he uses the watch to draw off the bad guys when they're threatening other boys that he encounters. I noticed one thing here. John Smith has a lot fewer funny quips in the face of danger. That's the difference in the personality than the doctor. He's much more just scared and running for his life and not stopping to be funny.
It definitely shows kind of the human side of this character, where they're obviously they're making him so that he hasn't fought. He's inexperienced in warfare, but he's teaching at the school where he has to learn.
Right. Yes, which is interesting. So apparently the John Smith legend that the TARDIS has created is not a war veteran.
Correct. Yeah.
And now we're really getting starting to get the high drama of his identity crisis, because Martha is like, we need the doctor, and I'm John Smith, that's all I want to be, and he's weeping.
Right. So yes, the Scarecrows, because the Scarecrows have moved the TARDIS to the school. They're trying to draw him out of the woods where he's hiding with Martha and Joan. And John Smith says, I'm not the doctor. I'm John Smith. That's all I want to be. John Smith with his life and his job and his love. Why can't I be John Smith? Isn't he a good man? And that's really the heart of this internal conflict that we're seeing here in this episode.
There's also a nice bit where he's talking to Martha about why he travels and stuff, and she makes the comment that the doctor is lonely.
That's why he has her. Right.
Yeah, and that's why he has a companion, and he says, and that's what you want me to become. Right.
That's hard. Like, how do you answer that? Yeah, you have to become this tragic figure because the world and the universe need you. So
so this was a tactical mistake on Martha's point. The correct answer at this moment is not because he's lonely, it's because we're friends.
Right. Yeah, once you say that. This is the point where I made a note where I said, how many people died because Tim took the watch and held on to it?
Yeah.
And that's
exactly
we'd mentioned that before last week's episode.
And at this point, the family of blood, since bringing the TARDIS hasn't worked, they up the game to the next level, and they start using space artillery to shell the village and destroy the village, and they're killing who knows how many people.
Right. Now, Tim says, when confronted, why have you had the watch all this time, and why didn't you return it? He says, because it was waiting. So he says he claims the watch told him to wait, but he admits, and because I was scared of the doctor, because I've seen him. And so John Smith here sees the restoration of the doctor as an execution of him. It's like a type of regeneration. In fact, we've seen the doctor react, not just this doctor, but other versions of the doctor react to regeneration the same way, that they'll survive, but
it won't be me.
Right. And that's an interesting perspective here, because again, John Smith is like a regeneration of the doctor. He is, he is the an incarnation of the doctor who will go away, but still be him. And so it's an interesting perspective. And it's Joan who is the one. Martha's arguments don't carry any weight, but it's Joan is the one who convinces him. And even when the doctor says, "But he won't love you," and yet, she says yes because. And what convinces him is they get a vision of the life they would have led together, all the way to his eventual death from old age. Where did that come from?
This is the last temptation of Doctor Who.
Well, I wondered, is this a temptation or a gift? Like, okay, you're not going to get to live a life together, so here is a memory of that life that you can carry with you.
Yeah, I think it's
that
both.
that's kind of how I took it. That's kind of how I took it, though. Of this is what could be, and you get to experience it to just even that little taste, if you will.
The message is that I think the Doctor has grand heroic adventures, but he can never live that ordinary heroic life that they saw.
There's another nice bit where John Smith realizes something he doesn't like about the Doctor, and he says falling in love didn't even occur to him. What sort of man is that?
Right, in the list of things to Martha to watch out for. Right, and in all of this, he's so emotional. He's so on the verge of tears. Basically, I have to give David Tennant props. I mean, so well done here. Well done.
Oh yes.
So then we have the Doctor showing up in the spaceship of the Family of Blood as Bumbling John. I'm pretty sure that everyone except the Family of Blood knew that.
As he's hitting every button on the wall.
Yeah, that this was actually the Doctor pretending to be human still. Yes.
It's very implausible. I mean, someone comes into my house and starts typing on my computer, and I don't think that's suspicious, Right. And it's like, okay, I know what these devices do.
Yeah. Hey, stop hitting that.
Yeah.
There is he's what did they say? He's still human. He didn't just make himself human. He made himself an idiot. That was a good line. And then Baines says, same thing, isn't it? So yeah, they don't like us very much. If it was so easy to fool their sense of smell, and not see him, why didn't he do this in the first place?
Good question.
But okay.
I mean, you can argue it's because of the watch he's got there and stuff,
right?
Maybe.
But then we're told, why was he running from them in the first place? And he says, I was being kind so as not to do to them what I would have to do.
And then this is getting back into the blustery Doctor where, he could have snapped his finger and the Family of Blood would have been gone. But, I'm going to give them a chance.
And this is a trend that will ultimately be played out in the Matt Smith era. And it's in A Christmas Carol where Kazran Sardik is the Doctor has appeared to him, or the Doctor and Amy have appeared to him twice as the ghosts of Christmas past and present. And he's talking to Amy and is like, why is he doing this? Why is he doing it this way? He's trying to be kind because he could get harsh. And but this is definitely the Doctor in I'm the oncoming storm mode. Yep. And this doesn't really ring credible because he was so scared in that opening sequence of the Throne of Blood. It's not, I'm so scared I'm going to have to imprison these people for all eternity.
Well, he does what he does to them is like, it's not just bad. I mean, these people were about to die of old age anyway, right? And so what he does is he imprisons them in such a way that they are not going to die. They're going to suffer for eternity. Like he basically condemns them to hell. That goes too far.
To do that. He could just let them die.
Yeah, it's very that was very uncomfortable moment here, like imprisoning the girl in the mirrors and
every mirror,
which is very creepy.
Yeah,
very creepy.
Yeah. Right. Every time you see something out of the corner of your eye, that's her.
Mirror. It's the little girl.
Or in the event horizon of a black hole, or all these other things. It's just that it was excessive is the word I think I wanted to use there. So
I think it was really cool, but I don't think this story set us up for it properly. Because the whole motive of the family is they want to live. They don't like the fact they've got a 3-month lifespan, like mayflies, he says. And so they need to consume a Time Lord so they can live further. Okay. And that warrants eternal punishment. I mean, administered by not human, but mortal justice here in this world.
Right.
You'd think it would have been easy for them to write it where the Doctor imprisons them somehow, or as they're, kind of that last stand and you see them dying and, your time's up.
Right. It could have been like that. Or just imprison them for the rest of their natural life, which would have been about 3 weeks. You know, that sort of thing. Right. Yeah. All I know is that some English farmer is going to get quite a surprise when he's clearing out the old scarecrows in his field when he finds Baines inside one of them. That would be a little creepy. He invites, now he's the Doctor, he's no longer John, and he invites Joan to travel with him to try again at falling in love. which is an interesting idea. If Martha's still there, awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think?
Also, at this point, Martha has confessed her love to the doctor and said she hopes he doesn't remember it once the watch is fully open.
Right, and that is not dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no, it is eventually.
No. It does mention at the end that he does remember it. Oh, I
right.
just said anything to get you to come back.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. But Joan rejects the proposals because John Smith is dead, even though the doctor says he's inside him somewhere.
Yeah, he says John Smith is dead and you look like him.
Right. Then
she's like, yeah, okay, I wouldn't want to be with this guy that's dead but has the same body.
And then she really throws it in his face, which is just one question. If the doctor had never visited us, if he'd never chosen this place on a whim, would anybody here have died? He doesn't answer. So she says, you can go. Ouch.
Yes. Oh, snap.
Yeah, that was harsh. Oh, man. So
at the same time, bittersweet undercurrents, because we know the affection they had for each other.
Right, right. And then there's some part of the doctor that was really infection with her and falling in love with her. So the doctor ends up leaving the watch with Tim, which is no longer, special, aside from being a Gallifreyan watch, which is kind of cool. I wouldn't mind having one, hint for birthday presents. But Tim says he knows what must be done, thinking of dying in the war. But it turns out the watch actually saves Tim on the battlefield because he sees
Context.
the time. Yes, sees the time, knows what's happening, and pushes himself in. Hutchinson, who the big jerk, saves the jerk who beat him to the side.
Yeah. So previously we'd seen the line with them looking at the watch. It's time, as the bomb is about to drop on them, and now it's time to the right, and they leap out of the way.
Right. Yep. How old is Tim here, do you think?
Well, he's a year
maybe
older.
Early teens.
Yeah.
He's like, really?
He's quite young. I think
14, 15.
14, 15, I think.
Not very plausibly soldier age, but
now, I mean, if he would have been, let's say, 15 at the time of this episode, then he would have been 16 at the time of the war a year later, and that was definitely not unheard of 16-year-olds enlisting.
Sneaking their way in. Yeah.
Also, it's nice to note in the scene, the follow-up context scene we get, Tim is now in command. He's the superior officer over the bully who had previously abused him in school.
Right. He says, come on, that's an order. Hutchinson's like, leave me. I'm not going to make it. No, I'm not leaving you. Well, he says, didn't I promise you all those years ago? So maybe it's more than a year later. Maybe it's several years. Interesting. So we end with, now many years in the future, Tim is an elderly man in a wheelchair. And a vicar is reading at an Armistice Day observance a poem called For the Fallen by Lawrence Binion, which has an interesting line in it that says, which you may sound familiar. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not wear them, nor the years contemn. Which is an interesting double meaning here for the doctor, isn't it? Because the doctor doesn't grow old, at least as we grow old. Which is an interesting idea. Given the age, I'm guessing this is not 2007, because by now Tim would have been long gone.
This was an issue, a minor thing, but I had an issue with this because based on Tim's age in this, this Armistice Day service should have been taking place like in the 1950s or the 1960s at the latest, and the vicar is a woman.
Well,
which
I think 70s or 80s. I mean, he's an elderly man in a wheelchair. 1913, right. Tim would have been around 14. So
yeah, but he had to be born around 1900 or earlier, 1890s.
Right. So he looked like he would have been 70s or 80s.
Okay, still, I think it's early for a female vicar in the Church of England.
Here's a hint. The book she's carrying, I looked it up online. It's called the Alternative Service Book 1980.
Okay.
So it has to be after 1980.
So even in his 80s, in the 1980s, a lady vicar would be unusual. Certainly.
Unusual, but not unheard of at that point.
Right.
Depending on what part of the 80s it would have been.
Right. But it's interesting that the poem itself is actually a quite good memorial for fallen soldiers. Yep. And I recommend it. Actually, I'll I'll remember to put a link in the show notes to it because
he wrote it like in September of 1914, so it was just right after World War I had started, and it became synonymous with Memorial of World War I. That's why it's read at those memorial services.
So the Doctor does not grow old, but the years do weary him. So, so any other notes on this episode, guys? Anything I haven't covered?
I had two small ones. One is when the Family of Blood is talking to itself. I mean, you have a member in one place and another member in another place. They do something that's either telepathy or mechanical telepathy. And I like and they'll talk to each other across distances. But the way they do it, I find visually very nice. All they do is they look slightly up and a green light shines on their face. And that tells us they're in communication mode. And they never say anything about this. They never explain it. But it's just a visually striking way for the filmmakers to signal this is a special state that's allowing them to communicate. And I like that. It's just very subtle. I like that. Also, I can't help but thinking of things through a linguistic historical perspective. And Joan at one point has a line where she's talking about how someone has been disintegrated. But because this is 1913 and she hasn't read all this science fiction where disintegration is the common word for what's happened, she says they were vanished. And normally I'm used to that usage, vanished as a transitive verb in the context of magic, in stage magic. If you make something disappear in layman's terms, you vanish it. And so it was neat to see this parallel construction used in a historically believable way as a substitute for what normally in science fiction would be called a disintegration.
Interesting. Yes. Yep. Very
so
good.
No disintegrations.
No disintegrations. Thank you, Lord Vader. Father Corey.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Excellent. So before we finish up, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who. And today we're thanking by name Chris, John D., Joseph F., Ronald S., and Austin T. through their generous donations and those of all of our patrons at sqpn.com/give. They make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows we do at SQPN. You can join them if you'd like by visiting sqpn.com/give. Any amount that you can give is greatly appreciated and helps us to continue what we do. So that's
and
it.
Don't forget to volunteer by emailing help@sqpn.com.
Yes, please. Thank you for remembering that. That's it from us. So what did you think of Family of Blood and Human Nature, this two-part story, and what we had to say about it? So let us know by visiting sqpn.com and putting a note on our show notes there or on the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. You can send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And you will be back next time when we'll be discussing the 6th Doctor story, Vengeance on Varos. Until then, Father Corey Stieketh, thank you for joining me in sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
My pleasure, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, he's like fire and ice and rage. He's like the night and the storm in the heart of the sun. He's ancient and forever. He burns at the center of time, and he can see the turn of the universe. And he's wonderful.
Right. This is going to be fun.